Good evening, everybody. I'm Nicole. Our reading for tonight is from 1 Thessalonians 2, 7b through 12. I'll give you a second to get there. Okay. 1 Thessalonians 2, 7b. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preached the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Nicole. You may be seated. When was the last time you read an article in the newspaper? I don't know. Do you do that? You ever go to a coffee shop and they got a newspaper there and you just kind of pick it up and you feel like, man, what year do we live in? It's kind of cool, right? Like we don't do that much anymore. But whether, again, this is not so much about the paper version, more in general. When was the last time you kind of invested time into reading a good article? This one, I would recommend for you to take time to read. It is going to take you, at the very least, 40 minutes, but maybe reserve up to an hour. It's a long essay written in the Atlantic called The Antisocial Century. So Derek Thompson, he's a secular columnist, not Christian. He used to write for the Atlantic. He began his essay, The Antisocial Century, with this story. A short drive from my home in North Carolina is a small Mexican restaurant with several tables and 4 stools at a bar facing the kitchen. On a sweltering afternoon last summer, I walked in with my wife and daughter. The place was empty. But looking closer, I realized that the business was booming. The bar was covered with to-go food. There were 9 large brown bags. And so as we ate our meal, I watched half a dozen people enter the restaurant without sitting down to eat. Each one pushed open the door, walked to the counter, picked up a bag from the bar, and left. In the delicate choreography between kitchen and customer, not a word was exchanged. The space once reserved for that most garrulous social encounter, the bar hangout, had been reconfigured into a silent depot for customers to grab food to eat at home. I mean, from a technical perspective, there's nothing wrong with the picture. People are getting exactly what they want in this situation. They want food, they ordered it, they're picking up. The restaurant is making money, if not even more money. So why is it unsettling? Why is there something that seems off? What's missing? Because we feel something is missing. And we know that something is off. We feel the loss. Thompson points out that out of the 74% of all restaurants, out of all restaurant traffic, 74% were takeout and people just ordering to go. 75, right? Like this majority of their orders. Other statistics, he goes on to say, point to a 30% rise in solo restaurant dining in the past few years alone. Like we're increasingly kind of making it a solo activity. Now, this really isn't about restaurants, although the story is what we do every week here is we gather and we kind of peel back a layer of life that we usually get used to because we swim in it, right? We talked about being in the current. And what we do is we do a biopsy. At least I do it in the beginning of the teaching, right? Like I'd like to take a look at a part of life that we kind of got used to, but something's a little bit off. And we do a biopsy on it to determine whether we have allowed something that seems benign to grow underneath how we go about life. We want to continue to always analyze those things. And in this case, we have seen the shift in the way that we live. What Thompson is bringing up here is that eating was once a communal activity and is becoming more and more individual and isolated. Think of movies. It used to be that you go to the movies with friends, and now more and more often we do it alone, and actually all of the entertainment, or most of it. Back in the days, a typical American went to the movies several times a month, and then he writes, quote, today the typical American adult buys about 3 movie tickets a year and watches almost 19 hours of television the equivalent of roughly 8 movies on a weekly basis. Right? The shift has been happening for a while. He goes on to say, in entertainment, as in dining, modernity has transformed a ritual of togetherness into experience of homebound reclusion and even solitude. Beautiful. And the list goes on. Like, there's other things, activities that became kind of me-oriented. I just want my space, and I want to do more and more things by myself. Give me that solitude alone with whatever I'm doing. We work from home. We do shopping from home now. Entertainment is at home, and even church is at home. We're home church, by the way, right? But you could do home church at home. You could be at home and watch it on TV. According to data from American Time Use Survey, from 2003 to 2023, so 20 years, in-person socializing in America fell by more than 20%. Definitely a decline. And when you notice these kind of big shifts, you should ask yourself a question. What's happening? Because am I being affected in the same way? For younger adults and unmarried men, the drop was even greater than 35%. Men, more statistics, I'm almost done with them. Men who watch television now spend roughly 7 hours watching TV for every 1 hour that they would spend with people outside their household. A definite disbalance. Since the early 2000s, time that Americans spend caring or helping or caring for people outside their nuclear family has fallen by more than a third. And this trend to kind of do things by yourself, it's not just a pandemic 2021 kind of thing. Turns out that according to another research, Americans spent even more time alone in 2023 than they spent in 2021. Okay? The whole point of his article, you could also have this option to just click play and listen to the article if you want to. I really encourage you to read it. The point is that Americans are now spending more time alone than ever, in his words. It's changing our personalities, our politics, and even our relationships to reality. That was his conclusion and point that he was bringing along. As somebody who's not a follower of Jesus necessarily, just kind of observing the culture, doing that biopsy, right? And here's the paradox. The reality is we still want deeper friendships and more friendships in our life. And we want more time with friends, while at the same time spending more time alone. Like, there's the thing that we really want, and then there's the thing that we're doing, and they're kind of going in the opposite directions, and we're doing the splits. And the longer we go without deeper relationship, the weirdest thing begins to happen culturally. You might know this experientially. We become more anxious for the connection that we know we need. And as Christians and followers of Jesus, we are not somehow unaffected by what's going on in the culture. If the culture around us models independent life, what does it tell us? To protect our time. To kind of say no more to people, and that's a good thing. To stay home, to keep life private, to avoid inconveniences. Then that ends up shaping our relationships and our friendships, the way we pursue them, the way we see them. Meaning that you might still have friends, and maybe even pursue to have friends, but the relationships remain surface level. Because again, we're kind of protecting ourselves. We're kind of slowly isolating ourselves more and more, even on an emotional friendship level. For example, you might know what's happening at my work, or with my kids, or what we're watching, or what we're frustrated about, but never really know what's happening in my soul, even though you're my friend. Or how am I really doing, and where do I need loving truth spoken into my life? Barna Group, a Christian research organization, found that 82% of Christians, 82% of those who follow Jesus, believe friends should challenge each other to grow. Maybe not surprising, majority of Christians believe that we should have friendships in our lives that challenge us, that invite us to live a different way of life. And yet 56%, 60%, right? Almost 60, say their spiritual life is entirely private. Their spiritual life is entirely private. So we want meaningful relationships, but when it comes to our deepest parts of our life, such as our walk with God, we keep it private. We keep it private. And when Barna looks specifically at discipleship, which is what we'll be talking about today, which is following Jesus together. That will be my definition. Here's what they found about discipleship in particular. Only 28% of Christians were both being discipled and intentionally disciple or helping someone else grow. While 39%, 40% were doing neither. So maybe the problem is not that we need more friends, but that we need to learn to lean in to the kind of friendship that the Bible invites us into and has been inviting us for centuries, where we actually help each other follow Jesus, where we actually help each other follow Jesus. And that's good news, because Jesus never intended for discipleship to be a solo or a private or individual project that we get to do by our own selves. He called people together. As you read the scriptures, you would see it. It shows up on a bit. He always was around, surrounded by people. He had his times of solitude, but he had a healthy community around him. He formed that community. More than that, what you would find is Jesus paired his disciples as he would send them out into ministry so that they would have each other as they go and serve. And he invited us, all of us, the followers of Jesus going forward, to ultimately do the same thing. Make disciples, right? To replicate this kind of new friendship that isn't just about hanging out. That's good for you. Hanging out with others is good even for your health, just mentally. But a kind of discipleship that is learning, where we are becoming a new humanity, following Jesus and learning to become more like him, learning to live as the Spirit-infused lives in the kingdom of God here and now and into the future. And so last time we talked the important value of community. We said we do life together. And the focus was, don't do it alone. Don't lean in into one of these things where, again, we're becoming sort of isolated and lonely. Don't do it alone. Be a friend to have friends. Show up for your community. Don't get into a habit, which is an ancient habit that the writer of Hebrews was telling us everybody's falling into it, just stops showing up to their community. Don't fall into that habit. And here, today, this week, we're talking about the value of discipleship. This idea that we invest in relational discipleship. We talked about it, and it's part of our core values. But the simpler term would be, we invest in people. We invest in people. And so here's what I'd like to place emphasis today with this value. We could potentially spend a decade together without ever seriously helping each other to become like Jesus. You could attend a church for decades without ever seriously either helping somebody or being helped to become like Jesus. Being in a community is not automatically discipleship, which is, again, intentional following of Jesus together with someone for a season, right? Because when I say discipleship, some of us picture a hierarchical relationship, right? So you have a top-down kind of mentoring or whatever you might say, where you take notes and I teach you, where I tell you what you're doing wrong and what you need to do next. Essentially, I'm your teacher and you're my student. That's sort of the first picture that comes into our mind. But that's not really the picture of discipleship under Jesus. Jesus is our teacher. And that's what's unique about discipleship to him, is that we get to do it together. You and I are his disciples, and together we get to follow him. Now, sometimes one person is farther along in a spiritual journey than the other. That's a given. Sometimes I need you to call out something in my life, and sometimes you need to, so I need to call out something in your life, and sometimes you need to call out something in my life. Sometimes it's an older Christian who invests in a younger believer. And sometimes it's flipped. It's a 20-year-old who has walked with Jesus for a while, and now it gets to journey with a 50-year-old who just began following the Lord. Right? Like that's irrelevant in terms of age or whatever any other metric. Sometimes it's just 3, 4 guys or ladies gathering together and saying, "Hey, let's help each other follow Jesus. Let's study this book for a while. Let's have a Bible study, or let's just pray over each other. Let's just share life." Because as a church, we want to invest in people. And so what we say by these values is we say, we got to make it a priority. This is a great value to God, and so it is to us. This is an investment that is worth pursuing and pouring our time and life into. We invest in each other. We grow, and that's how we grow together. And that's exactly the kind of relationship that Paul describes here in 1 Thessalonians that Nikki read to us today. In this passage and the letter altogether, see, Paul had come to Thessalonica, an ancient town in Greece. And he preached the good news there, and people came to believe, and a church was formed as a result. And so looking back, as he writes to them, he's looking back on what God has done there through his ministry. Notice that he's not describing a program or a system or a class or a Bible study or a certain way to study Torah, the scrolls and writings that they had at the time. What he describes is relational discipleship. he says we have made an impact is to this relational discipleship, showing how they lived alongside people and poured into them with love and care and deep concern. So I invite you to kind of go through the passage today and let it inform the way that we are to invest into people. Now, if you look in your Bibles to chapter 2 at the beginning, you might notice that why do I begin here, right? You saw 7b, and what is 7b? Like, for some of you, maybe even just the way that we usually display passages might be weird, like why do you do the column and so on. But usually, right, we want to go to a specific verse and then read from there. In this case, it kind of begins in the middle. It seems like in the middle of the verse. There's a bit of a separation there. But also, like I'm focusing specifically on this lower passage and not kind of the whole context of the passage, mainly for the sake of time. I tend to talk a lot. But also because kind of the message that I'm trying to bring is in verses 7 or 8 through 12. But I do want you to notice that this kind of discipleship, Paul says earlier, produces results. He spent several months, historians say, about several months, discipling this church or investing in this church. And as a result, they set an example of what it means to invest in people. Anyway, so 7 is, like I said, awkwardly combines the ending of a previous sentence and then the beginning of the next. But my focus is going to be on the rest of the statement. So 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, the second part of verse 7, he says this: just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we have cared for you. Now, the first observation that I want to make is about this life-giving Christian friendship, or as we call it, or we'll be talking about discipleship today, is that it will always have this at its foundation. You want to talk about discipleship that's going to work and that's going to replicate and that's going to produce change, it has to have this at the foundation. It's not so much about how experienced you are as a Christian, that you are either ready to disciple others or be in a discipleship process. It's not about your head knowledge. It's not about your degree in theology or how many podcasts you listen to or how much Bible you've read. Good things, but that's not about that. It's that, do you have this kind of deep care for one another that Paul is beginning with? This is the sign of maturity. When we become the people of love, a people of love, who genuinely love God and love others, and that the love of God compels us to then dearly love our neighbors and especially our brothers and sisters in my community. I love that Paul is using this surprising illustration. Like, don't miss this. He doesn't use a classroom analogy or a student and teacher kind of approach. When he's talking about the influence that he had on this church and how he discipled them, he's going to an image of a mother. And although the learning and like the discipleship and taking notes, it has place in following Jesus, Paul here uses a picture of a nursing mother because there's tenderness there that's needed for discipleship, patience, gentleness, care, because ultimately it shouldn't be transactional. It shouldn't be, I give you info and you are grateful for that info and now you're going to go and implement it. It should be relational, deeply relational. Mothers, they don't just care for babies because they're useful, right? Or there's some kind of like good out of that. I mean, ultimately, kids are going to grow up and hopefully take care of you when you're in your older age, hopefully. But that's a long-term kind of thing, even if that was the usefulness that parents see in kids. When the kid is growing up, there's not a lot of, you just give. The baby contributes almost nothing, and yet the mother goes above and beyond in caring for a child. And I love that Paul pulls on that analogy. That there should be this kind of giving that doesn't even expect much back. Paul could have pulled rank. He could have used his authority. He kind of hints at it here. Or his experience, or his position. Could have said, I'm the right guy. And yet he chose, along with others who were investing in people in Thessalonica church, he chose to be gentle and caring. He's describing one of the most intimate relationships he knows. This unconditional and sacrificial kind of love for another. One where you are taking care for somebody who's not even grateful until many years later. I mean, we really have to begin with a different set of questions when it comes to discipleship, when it comes to investing in others. I've had with a lot of you a conversation, about discipleship and what it means and the kind of usual questions that we have. Oftentimes it's, am I even qualified to disciple somebody? Like if I actually show up with somebody, will I know what to say? Do I know enough? I don't have enough experience. Where you and I should start is, Do you genuinely love people? If not, pause. You got work to do. You probably should have somebody come in your life and remind you how loved you are so that you could take the love of the Father and then be able to see people in a different light. But the question is, do I genuinely love people? Do you genuinely love people in this community, in this church? Because this right here is probably the most important qualification in investing in people. Has Christ formed you into a person who loves the people in your community? Do you really, really care for them? Are you willing to pay the price? Is there anybody here in this community whose spiritual journey matters to you personally? Not just your own, but somebody else's. Helping another person grow in their journey of following Jesus will always begin with this kind of gentle and sacrificial care for the soul of another. Paul goes on to say, because we have loved you so much. You see, he's making an argument. Because we have loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the good news, the gospel of God, but our lives as well. What do we get to see here? It's that when you are moved by genuine care and love for others, then you have the passion. You have the delight to share good news with others. If you're not feeling motivated about sharing faith to others, that's the key, right? Like maybe we're just not pervaded by the love of God. And more importantly, you are moved to not just share good news with them. Let me tell you about Jesus. You are moved to share life with them. That's a radical step. And so the second point is the second observation is we share our lives. We share our lives. That's how discipleship begins. Church, if we are going to be a place where people come home to God, we need to be deeply moved by the love of God in our hearts to become people who live like this, who are willing to then actually go a step further and share life with others. If you're going to consider the Great Commission seriously, which is a passage in the Bible where Jesus says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." You might have heard this. This is called the Great Commission. If we are to seriously consider the Great Commission, it will be more than just sharing good news and getting just a few cool phrases that you could summarize the gospel in 3 or 4 sentences and kind of give people the beautiful presentation of God, what God has done. It is more than just sharing your testimony, but it's genuinely becoming part of someone's life. Because you love them and you care for them. Paul says we didn't just tell you about Jesus when we showed up. We weren't just teachers to you. We did that. But we showed up and lived alongside you. We gave you our time and our presence, and we shared our life with you. The ordinary moments. We were there throughout the whole time. You saw us. If we are going to care deeply for others and invest in people, we actually have to make room in our lives for people. If you joined the church here and the community here, and you're also just as excited about the mission of helping others to come to God, it's gonna cost us. There's a price attached to it, to live in a way that others don't. That I make the space and time in my life. I'm going to say no to something so that I can become available to live life with others who are on the way, with others who are also followers of Jesus. You cannot rush life transformation. For that, you have to slow down and be present. Research on friendship suggests that roughly 40 to 60 hours are needed with a person to move them beyond acquaintance, somebody that you just kind of know here and there. And then another 80 to 100 hours to move towards friendship. It's a lot of hours. And then closer friendship takes substantially more time, often cited around 200 hours. It takes time for someone to know you and for you to know others and for you to know them. It takes time. And Sunday evening alone is just simply not enough time. That's why we're as a church, like I said in the beginning, we emphasize that we want to be people who gather in community groups. Around the table, we share a meal, we get to talk, we get to hear each other out, we get to know a little bit more personally each other, and then on Sunday, come together to worship together. But really, for us to invest in each other, we'll have to go beyond programs and lean into and seek out ordinary moments in our life. Because if we're going to rack up those hours and really become deeply, meaningfully friends with each other, that means lingering after dinner and not just, dipping out. Same here, like lingering after church. Thank you for doing that. You've been demonstrating it so well. One of the things we get to do at the end is we get to stick around, we say, for half an hour, which usually goes into an hour and a half at least, sometimes 2 hours. And then it's like, come on, just move on. Let's close the building and meet in community groups. But that's a beautiful thing, right? And so lingering after dinner or driving somewhere together with somebody. I just wrote some of the examples, like having coffee with someone every other week. As simple as that, but you are putting in hours of showing up and saying, I'm here. I show up, we share life with people. Playing a good game of golf or pickleball or a board game night, whatever you enjoy doing together. Helping somebody move or fix something or bring them a trailer or a lawnmower, whatever it may be, right? Being in each other's homes. It's these moments that slowly build deeper relationships. That's where friendships actually grow. And then over time, you begin to know each other. Now, no magic happens at once. You have to continually invest. But over time, something begins to change. You get to know each other a little bit more. And you begin to have more meaningful conversations as a result. You start to talk about things that really matter, and maybe you're starting to be a little more vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable in a community like that to grow. And you become a little more vulnerable, and then you have prayers, and you're slowly building this spiritual relation or friendship that leads to a shared desire to become like Jesus. Now, I heard you. Last time I shared 12 quotes. I kind of went through my 12 quotes from other sources. So today, I only got 2, I think. But I'm going to share one, but super long. And so if you don't like quotes, this is the time to kind of go get a drink if you want. In the meantime, that's the book. I told you I was reading it last week. I'm still reading through it. I tried to cut it down. Here's what surprised me about this passage. This guy is like, in Washington, D.C., he's a lawyer, attends a church there, and he's also just happens to be an author and a podcaster. And he doesn't know our church, but like when you get to the community group part and meeting in the evening on Sunday, it's like he's speaking to us, like what's going on here? So I'll read the whole quote to you, okay? Bear with me. Long quote. He says, often we may think that friends need to do something that seems Christian, to validate our friendship as an act of worship, as if we need to be friends and then pray together or go to small group or sing some worship songs to make our friendship an act of worship to God. These things are wonderful, but our friendships stand as acts of worship far before we even get to those other things. Friendship itself is the main act of worship. God sees your friends. He sees you too. He sees your work and your relationships, and He loves it. He rejoices in it and in you, and He is pleased when you act like a friend because you are acting like Christ. And that is the image that He made you in and the image that He is redeeming you in. The opposite is also true. When you are so busy getting your family right, doing well at your job, being present for your kids, serving your spouse, and making it to the Sunday evening service and the Wednesday night small group too, there can be a gaping hole in your worship. It is totally possible to live the picture-perfect nuclear family and church life and still have a gaping hole in your heart because when it comes down to it, you are living that life friendless and alone. You are not vulnerable to your spouse. No one in your small group really knows you because you don't share, and you don't have real friends because work and the kids take up all of your time. He says, I believe we should look at this kind of life the way we look at lives of functioning alcoholics or chain smokers. You can do a lot of other things right, but if this is how you're living, you're still on the path of death and destruction. It's just a matter of time until you implode. Likewise, he says, when we live without friendship, we're missing a key area of worship to God, and worship is a matter of life and death. Almost done. Told you it's a long quote. This is why having vulnerable friendships in your life is probably the best spiritual medicine for anxiety or depression. This is why a counselor would prescribe vulnerable relationships if it were that simple. All the data shows that lifelong friendships are the greatest predictors of health. Worship breeds health, and friendship is worship. This is why it is hard for deep, dark secrets to exist for very long when vulnerable friendships enters the picture. Sin wants us alone, but friendship declares war on such isolation. I hope you enjoyed that. That's a super long quote. I don't even know if that's proper to even read in a YouTube video. But there's the attribution. The guy's got a great book on community. You got to have space for this. You got to have space for this if we're going to be really a community that we are setting out to be. Hence our series on values. If you value it, you will prioritize it, hopefully. We continue to remind each other of these values. And then you will say no to something else in your life, and you're going to sacrifice something, and it's going to hurt. And it's going to feel like maybe you're giving up on a little dream here and there, on a hobby or something. But we do that so that we would have space for this kind of life. And once you share life with someone, what starts to happen is that they don't just hear you talk about your faith. Oh, you're part of home church community, you're going to church, and you really love this community, that's good to hear. But they actually see how you live out because you showed up in their life. They know you now. And that's where Paul goes next, verse 9. He says, surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the good news to you. And you are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. Commentators point out that Paul is saying, essentially, our conduct among you gave credibility to our message. Like that we said what we were or we preached and we walked the talk. We preached and then we walked the talk as well. And so third observation that I want to make here is that when we invest in people, before we say much, we live by example. When you're going to share life with somebody, one of the things that we're going to be compelled to do in these discipleship relationships, relational discipleship, is to live by example. It doesn't mean that we are perfect, but we live by example. We walk the talk. In discipleship, in following Jesus together, what's important is not just what we share, but how we live it out. Paul is basically saying here, you didn't only hear what we taught, but you actually got to see the kind of people we are. You got to see who's this guy that's preaching from stage so nicely with his notes and everything. But then you get to see, is he trying to live out the things that he is talking about? You might be aware that when you read through Paul's letter to another church in Corinth that he pastored at some point, where he said, follow me as I follow the example of Christ. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. In following Jesus, we need examples. We need these cascading examples of somebody else is following Jesus, maybe a little longer than you, and I get to learn something from you, and vice versa. You might be new to following Jesus, but sometimes the kind of thing that God speaks to you might actually be a correction that is needed in my life as well. And so, again, we need examples from each other. Not perfection. Not, oh, now I have to be so perfect and everything that's going to turn us into Pharisees, a group of religious people who care about image management more than they care about the reality of life. And so we need encouraging examples of God's faithful work in my life and in your life. I need you, and you need me in life to show that we are following Jesus together. Discipleship is not so much about, let me tell you what to do. It's more about come closer to me. Come close enough that you actually get to see how I am trying to follow Jesus. Who have you let close into your life? That's the question that I want you to think about. Who knows you in your life? And not just maybe your kids, they get to know you pretty well, or vice versa, parents, or your spouse, but who else that knows you really well and deeply? Who can see not just what you say you believe, but actually how you live the life? Who are those friends in your life that are outside of your household that know you? If we're going to invest in people, call it discipleship if you will, they need to see how you actually apologize, especially the people to whom we witness about following the way of Jesus. They need to see how you handle pressure or stress, how you pray when you're afraid of the outcome. How do you cope with frustrations or disappointments? Those oftentimes speak more about what we really believe and what we long for. And maybe they'll be there to correct you and uplift you and encourage you. How do you treat your spouse or your children? How you repent after failing? And how you follow Jesus in everyday life. Sometimes the most powerful discipleship is not, you might think, a course that I took. We do courses here. We love them. I think they're important tools in discipleship. But it's not the courses or the sermon that you heard or a conference that you attended. Sometimes the most powerful discipleship moments, and this is, again, just reading, sort of reflecting on people's interviews when they were asked, what has been the most, brought the most shift into your life? Oftentimes it's a person that you remember, that had an impact on you, usually in a way you can't explain. And when asked to say, well, what kind of things they've done, or what kind of program they used with you, or how did they impact you, and you can't even put the words together. All you could say is that they just loved Jesus and it radiated through their life. They just loved Jesus and it made me want to love him more. And all you remember is how this person impacted you in that life. And so lead by example in these friendships. But examples alone are not enough. The people in your life also need you to be courageous enough to offer a word of encouragement, a word of comfort, sometimes, maybe often, a word of correction or a loving push forward. And so Paul goes on to say, for you know that we dealt with you, each of you, as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. Man, there's a few points in here, at least a few. For example, I didn't really notice this in my initial reading of this place, but you see how balanced real discipleship is? Again, whether it's for the vision towards how you should be with your kids if you're a parent, or like a friend discipling a friend, or think of it this way. I want you to put on the hat that most is relatable to you. Or if you're a team lead, investing to another team member, or a community group leader, caring for the group, right? Notice how you balance discipleship words that you speak, that you bring into the relationship. Encourage, comfort, and urge to live a worthy life. This is how you balance it. Sometimes you need to encourage someone to keep going. Sometimes you need to encourage them. They need a little bit of a positive, like, you got this. God's not done with you yet. You can do this, right? Like, to get them going. Other times you need to comfort them and say, I'm here for you. Or you need to be just present. No moving forward, but just be present with them and stay with them and say, I got you. I'm with you. I'm by your side. Let's pray about this. And yet other times you need to say, I think it's time to take another next step. I think it's time to move into the next thing that God is calling you into. Or to say, I love you too much to pretend that this is okay. Or to say, you don't have to be stuck here. God's got so much more for you. We need those balanced approach, balanced perspective to both encourage and comfort and also to urge people on to a better life. In this way, we help grow each other. That's kind of the fourth observation that I'm making from this passage for today. And the last one, and then we'll go to Jesus section. I recently heard a pastor say, leadership is example and invitation, not coercion and control. Maybe some of you experienced discipleship that was more about control or kind of came almost close to coercion, where you were asked to do something that your heart just wasn't there. This is a leadership advice, but it also applies to discipling relationship. It's not that I might know what the next step is for you. I might know, looking at your life, that you need to change something, but I also know that I cannot force a change in your life. That I am not the Holy Spirit in your life. And a lot of times it's the hardest to do for pastors or leaders or people who are involved like in discipling others, because you just want to move it at the speed of your own understanding and what you see in the person's life. But we are not the change agents in other people's life. We co-work with the Holy Spirit who is at work in them and in us and through us. And the best I can do is love you, pray for you, and co-work with the Spirit of God to know the right timing, when to comfort, when to encourage, and when to urge you and get you moving in the direction where God is moving you. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be forth with the people that God has blessed us to be friends with, but to pay to where the Spirit is moving us in their life. Another line that I heard that made me think is that coercion is not the fruit of the Spirit, right? Coercion is not a fruit of the Spirit. And so we need to detach that from our maybe discipleship perspective, this hierarchical, I tell you. But yet, in a good friendship, there is place for sharing truth and love. That is a New Testament way of living life. And there's actually no other way to live life. We need to learn to share truth in love, as much as there should be sharing of comfort and encouragement. And keep this in mind. Most of us really, like deeply in our hearts, really want to have these kind of friends that would tell us the truth, that would kick us in the butt when it's need to be kicked in the butt. We really want. Remember Barna research I told you about? 82% of Christians believe that friends, our Christian friends, should challenge us to grow in healthy ways. That's what they found. And so if we are to invest in people, then build the deeper kind of relationships where you are challenged lovingly, and in turn, lovingly, don't miss the qualifier, lovingly, compelled by the love of God in your life for another person, then lovingly challenge others. Being challenged lovingly and lovingly challenging others with things like, hey, I may be off, but can I tell you something I've noticed about you? Those can only happen once you've gone through all the steps. You care for them genuinely, deeply. And you have showed up. You made space and time. And you are living by example as much as it is possible. You're not perfect, but you're following Jesus. And then you have the space where you can bring this kind of thing. Hey, can I tell you something I noticed about you? Or you keep saying you want to change this. Let's talk about one step that you can actually take to change something. Or I think you might need forgiveness here. Right? Like harder things that we want to hear from somebody else. And maybe the first thing is we're going to get defensive or whatever, but we want to be in a relationship where somebody speaks to us to say, I love you, but I don't think this choice is leading you towards life, and so on. Again, these belong in a context of deeply loving and caring, life-sharing relationships where they see your life and you see their life, and then you can speak into each other's life. And this is not a utopian vision of life either, but something that you can live today, church. Community, home church community. I know this because I see it happening on various levels among some of you. Those of you who are leaning into it and fighting tooth and nail and claw, or whatever the saying goes, for it to have these relationships where you are with other people. I know it because I am myself involved in this kind of life, in leaning more and more into it and seeking it out and saying no to something else so that I could have this kind of life. And so healthy Christian friendship is not about constantly evaluating each other. Let me get a list of things that I need to tell you about you, right? But neither is it about avoiding every difficult conversation. It has to be this balanced approach. We need all three: encouraging, comforting, and urging. Some Christians are really good at encouraging, and then they're not challenging much, right? And it's all just rainbows and butterflies and beautiful pink skies. And other Christians, all they have is just, they know exactly what you need to change, and you better get going and working in that area of your life. And all they have is just this discernment for your life all the time, right? We need to have both. We're good at some, we're terrible at others. It's love and mutual obedience to Jesus, like knowing that I follow Jesus as much as we're following Jesus together, and love towards others that will help us to decide when to lean into one and another. Don't go based on what rifles your feathers, right? Like what pisses you off about a person, or what makes you so excited about another person. Learn to lean into what the Holy Spirit is inviting you to speak. And sometimes it's one of the hardest things because you're like so convinced you should talk about this, or you're so convinced that you shouldn't bring this up. And when the Holy Spirit starts to speak, it could be challenging. It could be challenging. And so, do you have someone in your life that has the permission to challenge you? That's my challenge to you today. I'm challenging you. Thank you for allowing me to be, at least in some way, a challenger in your life. And I welcome your challenge back as well. I get to say so many things from stage. Come up and ask me, Alex, how are you doing with that? How are you living in that area of your life? I'm open to that. But more than that, I'm also open to my friends who challenge me in the smaller communities and the smaller groups. Do you have someone that encourages you when you're tired, or comforts you when you're down? Do you do that for someone else? Do you have somebody that you are also providing that, giving, not just receiving? Do you have a friend that you do that for? And finally, like everything that we preach, I'm coming to an end. Everything points to Jesus. This shouldn't be a surprise for those who follow Jesus for a while, but you might find it really kind of fascinating and surprising that everything that we preach in the church will always come back to Jesus. Because here's what Paul says: encouraging and comforting and urging you to live lives worthy of God. It's all about Him, and we're living for Him. That's our apex and focal point and center and hub of our life. Like, that's all Him, who calls you into His kingdom and His glory already now calls you into it. He shared both kingdom and glory in His life with us. Jesus once said, you might remember this, He says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. As I have loved you first, so you must love one another. Ilona today shared the passage, for God so loved the world, before we could even respond. We were super probably messed up and happy with our own way of living life. But He so loved the world that He didn't let us just disappear into extinction and be gone in our sin and the muck and everything that we were as a humanity. He so loved us before we could ever respond to Him. And so He says, as I have loved you, so now you must love one another. That's the source of your love. Don't try to manufacture it. Understand how much you were loved. If you still think that you are deserving of God's love in any way, that's probably a good place to begin. To realize and really analyze, take a hard look at your life. What can we offer and what can we bring with our sinful nature? And yet He's so merciful and kind and pours love into us. And that's where you get the compassion towards others. He says, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. As with everything else in the good news that is preached by Christians throughout the ages, whatever God invites us into, he has first done it for us. So for example, and hear this too, this is good news. God cared deeply for you. He did not want to watch us from far, but he cared deeply enough for you individually and personally. He came down to be among us, to become like us. He walked among us. He saw people and was moved to compassion and lived among people and ultimately loved us to the point of death. He shared his life with us. That's what's striking about when you read the narratives. He's just living an ordinary life while being this extraordinary person on earth. He shared his life with us. When on this earth, he just ate with people. Somebody was saying in the Gospel of Luke, the funny thing is, not funny at all, but Jesus is either on the way to a meal, he's at the meal, or he's about to go to another meal. Like as you read through the Gospel of Luke, he's all about sharing meal, tables, sitting with people. That's where conversations happen. And so, it's not funny. It's good. He was constantly visiting other people's homes. He ate with them and conversed with them. He was having conversations with followers and sinners alike. That's where you have him. He shared ordinary life with the discipleship. And ultimately, he gave his life for you and me. And now through his Holy Spirit, like it doesn't stop. Now through his Holy Spirit, his life is present in you and me. That's the extent of his sharing. And he's saying, I don't need you to get your life together. I need you to get your life to me so that I could live through you. Let me empower you. Let me make you into a new person. He led by example, not just by teaching us how to live, but actually showed up and showed us how to pray, how to forgive, how to serve. None of the things that Jesus asked us to do, he doesn't show himself first and then says, I'll help you do that. He shows us how to suffer faithfully, how to surrender to the Father, and ultimately invited us to follow in his footsteps. And then it is him who encourages us and comforts us and urges us towards worthy lives. And he's walking beside us, leading us into his kingdom. That's what discipleship is ultimately all about. This is why we invest in people. Get it? That's kind of the value, the simplified value. We invest in people because that's what God does. We do it relationally. We do it with love, being compelled by the greatest example of all time, Jesus himself. We follow in his footsteps. Jesus followed up that saying by saying, he followed up saying, I have loved you first. And then he says, by this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you will love one another. This is how you know that Great Commission is being fulfilled among us. This is how we know. This is how we know that discipleship is happening, that discipleship is succeeding in this church, is that you deeply care and love one another, and the rest will follow. This is how people will know. These guys are crazy. They care about each other. They care about strangers. They care about people that they haven't known before, and now they're showing up for them and not expecting anything in return. And then they patiently and gently carry each other through all the failings and weirdnesses and all the stuff that comes with being human. So here at Home Church, we invest in people. I'll close with this story. In Okinawa, Japan, there is a tradition that I've learned about. It's called moai. It literally means a meeting for common purpose. What's also interesting to note, they live in a blue zone, which researchers, as you may be read of blue zones, researchers are wondering what's happening in these blue zones where people's longevity is so much higher. And research suggests that this is actually one of the contributing factors because just something special happens in Okinawa, Japan. And this is one of those contributing factors. Sometimes it's the weather or the kind of food, like I know there's a belt in Italy. It could be other factors as well. But here's what happens. When children are born on the island, some are connected with a small group of other children, kind of like a pod, like you're going to be friends now together for life. And so these people, they may remain committed for the rest of their lives. They grow up together, they play together. Later they work and raise families oftentimes, again, living in close proximity. They help each other through sicknesses, lend money when someone falls on hard times, and eventually, grow old together. For them, it becomes almost like a second family. I think they tapped into something here. tapped into the way that we were created to be, is that we need meaningful relationships. We both need them in life, like people that, maybe our families that are close to us, like our parents and so on. But we also need them outside of our household, people who are friends. And I love this because as followers of Jesus, we need people like that too, and maybe even more. Not everybody deeply connected with everybody, like in this gathering right now. Like you'll chat and you'll have a good time today, that's good. But this is not really depth, right? We need somebody in our life that really knows us. And so I'm just going to continue to drum on that drum or hit that bell or whatever the saying is. That we need somebody in your life. You just do. You can say no to that and face the consequences of a life with whatever comes out through that, right? What follows. But the invitation is to have deep friendships, to have somebody who knows you, somebody who's helping you follow Jesus, somebody who's investing into you, and maybe it's time for you to invest in somebody else and to show up for somebody else. And so my challenge for you today is, who are your people? Who are your people? Some of you are leaders, some of you are parents, some of you, this relates to so many areas of your life. But who are your people that you're showing up in this kind of way? Who are your spiritual friends?